Hi, I'm Danger Dan Jers, the host and GM of the D&D Real Play podcast, D&D Dark. Join us on Wednesdays for an absurd, over-the-top comedy horror adventure, starring some of history's most infamous monsters.
I'm Ben Magnet. I play Mary Frankenstein, our barbarian.
I am Daniel Cruz. I am playing Imhotep the Mummy, our cleric.
I'm Jordan, and I play Larry Talbot, a lycanthropic warlock.
I am Grayson, playing Jack Griffin, the Invisible Man, the party's rogue.
I am Aaron. I play the Phantom of the Opera, our bard.
For more information, go to dndarkpodcast.com and listen to us anywhere you find podcasts.
Let's go. Master of all things tabletop. With the Paladins of Podcast. They ruin the games you love by talking rules that suck, how to build kick-ass encounters, destroy worlds, and really get your players invested. So go ahead and throw that fistful of dice at someone. Because we're going on a side quest.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Side Quests with your Paladins of Podcasts, Rob and Eli. How are you doing, Eli?
I'm doing great. I got a new mic set up now that I'm back from Chicago, and my internet, well, as long as the power stays on.
Hey, knock on wood. I mean, things happen when you're doing this remote, so hopefully everything will stay pretty solid. Did you have a good Christmas?
Yeah, I had a great one. Wasn't too RPG themed, but well, it was a little bit. I got some really nice wormwood dice that are like this nice. I got them right here.
Yeah.
They're these nice kind of blue and black cracked ones. I think they're stone.
Oh, sweet.
They're nice. The first roll was a 13, so
hey,
above average. Average. But my big haul was I got a number of dungeon tiles. Like kind of like Dwarven Forge-esque. So
yeah,
I'm excited to bust that out for EliCon 3.
For sure, man. That sounds great. Mine was really low key. My youngest was 6, so it was all super short and super sweet. Dug it.
Did you
cool.
Get any RPG related gifts?
Yeah, I got a small set of miniatures, and I've got two things I'm actually really excited about. One of them is like a vinyl sticker for like spell effects and treetop canopies, and it uses static cling to stick on vinyl playmats. But because I've got a glass tabletop, it's just like the holiday window clings, and it works equally as well. They're freaking awesome. And I got 600 tiny little bricks. Individual bricks.
Are you playing a game of shoot, what is that? What is the yellow brick road from? Wizard of Oz.
Oh, no, I am not. I'm actually going to use them to build fences or buildings and walls, etc. You just glue them together. And it's way more complicated to glue individual bricks together, by the way, than it sounds. Like you're like, oh, that sounds easy. I'd rather do that. But no, it is painstakingly painful. But my head says it's easy, and I choose to do it that way, and I regret it every time.
Practice makes perfect.
Yeah, for sure. So one of the big things that we had come across in the last week is the changes to the OGL 3 by Wizards of the Coast. They wanted to kind of let everybody know where they stand on companies that make more than $750,000 a year off of the OGL license, and how it was never meant for things like virtual tabletops.
Yeah, I think part of this is because one D&D or the next edition of D&D is also coming out with its own virtual tabletop. So I think it's a little bit of just like posturing in terms of kind of the industry. And then the other one is about those creators that make money. I think that's not going to affect a lot of people. I think if you're doing that well in writing D&D content or creating D&D content, you're gonna survive with the changes. And them wanting to have more money in this situation is really anything you kind of expect from a corporation.
I absolutely agree. And my biggest concern actually comes down from the idea of one D&D having their virtual tabletop, because as we were talking about before we hit the record, was something like Roll20, you said, uses their Dungeons and Dragons content for 75%-ish players, their player base.
Don't quote me on that. I'll look at the actual numbers.
Sure. But we know it's a high number. And my biggest concern is that by the way it's worded is that if you don't have an existing contract with them already, they're definitely not going to allow you to continue using their content through the OGL license, because that's never what it was intended to be used for. So I'm instantly imagining them slowly squeezing all of these other virtual tabletops out so they can dominate the market for D&D in one location. And it's not always a smart move.
I'm not too worried about them making bad moves, because I do secretly hope that D&D does dominate the industry, and I do hope that if they start making some bad decisions, that gamers will start to spend money in other areas of gaming and at other gaming companies. I think there's a number of great gaming of other great companies out there, and I think having competition breeds innovation.
Sure.
We are a capitalist country, after all.
Oh, dude, yeah, that's for sure.
Yeah, we don't need to get into that, but
yeah.
Having more money in other gaming companies is not going to hurt the scene.
I agree, and I think that it will open up the ability for players to either divide into two camps, and those are the camps that don't want to pay the ridiculous price for whatever Wizards is going to put out, and they will move on to other games that are more easily accessible with a lower financial cost. And you will have the people who just stick with Wizards through thick and thin. They will pay the $60 per hardcover book and the $60 per virtual tabletop copy and keep rolling. So we'll see what's going to happen.
As long as people are still rolling dice and having fun, I'd be a gamer no matter what. So I'm not too worried.
Same. It does make me feel really grateful, though, that I got in when I did, because it was before this era of virtual tabletop and prior to the, I don't want to say like the worldwide scene as though it's a bad thing, because it's wonderful, but it also makes me sound like an elitist. I should just better shut up and move on to the next topic at this point.
Yeah. What was the next topic? You had a situation about wishes.
Yeah, I came across a DM asking for advice about giving his party wishes. And he had stated that he had given the party, which sounds like it's 3 individuals, 3 wishes. So 1 wish each. And each of them asked to go up 1 level with no negative side effects. That was their wish. I want to go up 1 level with no side effects. And he wants to know how he can monkey paw it to something less desirable. How he can kind of screw his players over from such a powerful wish that is granted to them. And it bothers me that he's taken this position. So. Yeah.
It bothers me a little bit too. I don't think every wishing situation needs to be monkey pawed. At least from where I stand, reading a wish like that, it doesn't seem like the players want to be adversarial. If you have a situation where you're coming up with all these clauses, and then play along with it. But I think if your players are just pretty straightforward with it, this almost seems like it's almost like a session 0 kind of line where it's like, hey, I'd like to play this style game with this. Then you play a game like that. And so I don't think they should fuck with them.
I agree. And it bothers me to no end. And as I mentioned just before we recorded, is that it pushes into that idea that everybody hates the player versus DM aspect. But I think this pushes that from the DM side. Like, they're not asking, like you said, they're not asking for a whole bunch of clauses and sidebars. It's a straightforward, simple, we all want to go up one level with no negative side effects. And he thinks it's ridiculous. He thinks he made a mistake. He wants to undermine them. And to me, that feels immediately like he's setting up that DM versus PC mentality. Like, nope, we're not going to allow you to do that. I'm going to undermine your wish. It's not going to work out the way you want it to. And as a player, my instant concern would literally be, well, shit, what else is he going to screw with? And how much time and effort do I want to put into making sure I'm not constantly on the receiving end of some shit show?
I think a lot of GMing is very reactionary. And so it does come down to, if you're at that table, if the players want that adversarial GM versus player situation, then play into that. Otherwise, that's not what they want.
Right. Let it go. And I think that with this wish in particular, I think there's a whole lot of different things that the DM could do with that. You know, they could narratively put an effect of, now that they've gone up a level or gone up in so much power so immediately and being blessed by the gods, that could be a story point now. You know, these are like the paragons at this point. They didn't learn from experience. They were instantly granted a boon as such. And that's a way to enhance the story. They could throw more challenging encounters at them. And I love doing that because I like overpowering my players. You know, I love power leveling them and everything. So hearing about this kind of shit ends up just, I could go on for hours, actually. It bothers the hell out of me.
So your players really like to, I mean, they gain levels really quickly. I assume they are getting a large amount of, or are they making a decent amount of money?
That is my usual. This particular game I'm running now between my 3 campaigns is the complete opposite that I've always done. So I've really slowed the roll. But normally...
Is that where one of your players asked for a bartering system?
They actually asked for a bartering system beforehand. They wanted to play a merchant, and the merchant wanted to explore in both downtime activity and active game sessions how to buy and sell trade goods at a profit, as well as a bartering system to work it back and forth. But because it's always only been one player, I've always I kind of fluffed a little bit of rules to make it work here and there, but have never fully developed a bartering system.
Well, if you're looking to just steal a system for like buying and trading and selling, I have played Traveler.
Okay.
And Traveler, like, one of the big appeals, like, part of the biggest thing about the game is you have to be making money because you start off in debt. And one of those ways you can do it is by being a merchant. And there's an entire process of generating like what a planet needs and what they want, and like if something buys high or low. But they have an entire mercantile system worked into the game, and it's all off just 2d6s. But in some of the older Traveler guides at the very beginning, there's usually a conversion chart for like how to convert the dice to different, like to D20 systems to less dice. Super helpful that way.
Yeah, and you said that was off of Traveler, correct?
Yeah, and that's if you want to go really nitty gritty with it. So if you wanted to, work out the trade economics of your empire. Does your player like to roleplay a lot?
Yeah, in fact, his biggest point in roleplay is if he ends up in combat, he did something wrong.
That almost seems like you want to start looking into systems for quote unquote social combat.
Yes,
where you can start having a more back and forth. And like sway their opinion in one direction or another to bartering.
I like that as well, because one of the things that we've included in this game is things like verbal duels. So they can have battle of wits and verbal duels, and it really plays into what this player in particular wants to see. So when I had sent out my questionnaire, my session -1 questionnaire, it was all based on what my players want to see and what they want to do. So every rule that came into play, I've found a way to implement it for the game. So every player has an opportunity to do what they want. Every player has an opportunity to use all of the skills that they have on their sheet. They can really use their character's abilities to the fullest. This game that I've designed entirely for them.
Well, I look forward to reading this new game that you have designed.
It is a very slow going process.
Yeah, there are so much house rules.
Yeah. That's just the thing. And it's funny because when you start, you kind of build off of what you know. So the game starts in one system, and then all of a sudden you're like, you know what? At the core, it's the essence of the system, but by the end, it's a different system entirely. So I'm excited to see where it ends up. Cool. So now that we just got off of Christmas, this one kind of came up a second time. And it was another one of my players. They asked me about custom-made character sheets based on character class and personality. She would really like to make some for all of my players. How do you feel about those?
Awesome.
Yeah?
Yeah. What's the downside?
I love the idea, but I'm always afraid that a character sheet is going to be constantly brutalized. Eraser marks, pen marks, screwed up, lost, wrinkled, etc. But I love the concept and idea. I think it's incredibly spectacular that a player wants to gift something physical that's personalized to each player. I didn't say no. I said, yeah, let's figure out a way to do it. I'd never heard of it before, actually. She had shown me some great examples on Etsy, which are freaking sweet, by the way, but a lot of work nonetheless.
I mean, it sounds like it was offered in good faith. I mean, marking that character sheet up is a sign of loving it. I don't think that's a bad thing to mark up a designed character sheet.
I guess I can see that. I like to keep my my paperwork very pristine, so I always have secondary note pages. But I like the idea, and it's neat. It's something I'd never heard of before. I think it's really cool. It just seems like a lot of work. She didn't ask me to do any of it, but I'm actually really excited and hoping that she does do this for our players. I think it'd be really special.
Yeah, I think that would be great if one of your players did that for the group. I think it would be sucky if they asked you for it and they wanted you to pony up for it. I think that's a different situation.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, I didn't. Yeah, do you think that she was asking you to pay for it and get it for the party?
No. Okay, she specifically said that she wants to design something, but she doesn't have a lot of computer graphical know-how like I do. So I told her if she can get something on paper, I can at least digitize it. So we can get that working. Like I love the idea of having something custom like that. I think it's badass, but at the same time, like once it's in its perfect stage, I hate the idea of it being ruined.
Just make some extra copies, I guess, Rob. You can have one for yourself, and you give each one 2 copies.
That's
Isn't
just
that what collectors usually do with books they like to read?
Yeah. I should probably turn on the blur feature to my camera so you cannot see the duplicate copies of some of my books. But yeah, I love it. I think it's cool. I guess another idea that I wanted to kind of talk about is something I know that I do. And it's something I think a lot of DMs do, but I don't know if it's ever really addressed. And it's how to keep the party engaged, but not in the sense that they're invested in the game, but if they're just having fun overall. And I always tell my players that the amount of fun and interest that they have in the game is up to them. Like my role is reactionary based on what they're doing. So if they don't like where the game is, they have to change what they're doing. But ultimately, I feel like it's really a way for me to wash my hands of any responsibility of that. And while I do have a question form or a survey that they can send to me at any point in time on what they enjoy, what they don't like, etc., I don't know if that's the best way to handle it. I'm sure there's a better way, and I'm sure that it's a situation that you've encountered as well. Like my players aren't having fun. What do I need to do to change this up? I'd kind of like to hear what you've been able to come up with on that?
Yeah, I do talk to my party and like have like I try to talk to each player like at least once a year. Like at least in my long-term group, I like try to devote some time to talk to at least every player once about how they feel the direction of the game is going. So I think that's important. We also, I try to have a very like open communication between the players and myself about like how the game is going. Like if they feel like they're, constantly overwhelmed, if there are any specific things they'd like to, explore or adventure or would like to see more or less of. So that's one thing, but I do think it is important to also see what your players are having the most fun doing and either replicate what that is hitting or more of those events.
Sure. Again, that's kind of a reading the room thing and open communication with your players, which both are incredibly important. It definitely makes. Go ahead.
Yeah, just like read the room's intensity. Like think back to those high moments. Like was it in the middle of a combat? Was it when someone was getting, robbed in a tavern? Was it when Theth accidentally fell asleep on watch for the fourth time? Who knows?
Right, and I like that. And one of the downsides to, in my situation, having a table with up to 7 players is that I have to monitor 7 players. And it's hard to constantly make sure everything is enjoyable for 7 people at one time. So if there's 2 players I'm usually concerned about, but they don't ever seem to complain or say anything. They've always been the sit in the back. They don't ever seem to have fun, but even when presented with an opportunity to open up, they don't say anything. So I do get worried about them. Without guidance from them, I can't give them anything extra. So I continue to hunt down things that they seem to possibly maybe enjoy.
Takes 2 to tango.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's funny because I was sitting down with new players earlier this week about getting some of their characters set up, and they asked about character voices. And I'm like, I am able but unwilling to do a lot of character voices. Not because I don't want to, but as DM, I am constantly managing a table, and every NPC, every possible plot line, character idea, concept, note that comes my way, to divide my attention between each NPC and voices would be too much. And I'm already providing them the space, a 5x10 table, folders with all of the information and knowledge that they have. I've given them everything. Voices at this point is just too much. And I'm afraid
I really think you should just embrace the voices, because I'm not great at voices. And like, especially when you're getting it's almost a joke at this point. There's always one grouchy old man voice. They're always like, "Oh, hey, it's that guy." So yeah. I think you should just embrace it, because I think it can be fun. It can be interesting, and like the players will think it's fun regardless of how good or how bad it is. If it's bad, it'll be even funnier.
I understand that, and I get it, but I already dress up. I have an entire DM persona that I got to stay into. So I don't want to end up like Robert Downey Jr., who's playing a guy who's playing a guy who's playing a guy in Tropic Thunder. I know
I don't think you should be afraid of trying things that you're bad at, especially at GMing, because that's how you can get better at GMing.
I'm not bad. I don't want to divide my attention even further. That's all I'm saying. But what'll end up happening is I'll probably make a few, and then we'll all laugh about it and break the entire immersion, and I'll try again next session.
Yeah, there you go. There you go.
Yeah.
I need is like 4 or 5 to rotate through anyways.
Everybody always ends up sounding the same anyhow.
Indeed.
Why get to that point slowly if I could just circumvent the process and get there immediately?
If you start in an accent, then the accent will hold in their imagination.
All right. You know what? I'll do it for you. And I'll do it for my young lady player who is adamant that I do so.
Oh, shucks. Thanks, Rob.
Yeah, not a problem. I'll tell you how it went. Hopefully it goes splendidly horrible. I mean, horribly splendid. Good. Hopefully it goes good.
Well, but speaking of trying something, or at least making something that potentially bad, well, that seems like a bad open start to it. But I want to talk about this Dungeon23.
Yes.
Have you heard about it?
Just earlier today when you mentioned it. And I massively read the Gizmodo article on it and some of the reference links that they sent out. And I'm excited.
So, yeah, there's always these challenge things, like do a push-up every day, cumulatively all through the month and whatnot. And there's been some... Yeah, eat a Tide Pod. Please don't. But this is one for creating a mega dungeon where every day you create a room. And I actually highly recommend, if you do this, to read that article, because that article goes so far and above and beyond explaining what it could be and advice and different ways to approach it. And
you're talking about the Gizmodo article that I just referenced, right?
I believe so.
Okay, I'll make sure to link that in our description, because it is a fantastic article, like you said.
Yeah, it is the Gizmodo article. Yep. The big things is you just create one room or one encounter a day, and then at the end of the year, you have a mega dungeon.
Yes,
easy peasy. And I think the great part about it is it encourages you to just make different rooms, and they can be bad.
I love that you're so gung-ho about the bad rooms. What I really like about this is that the way they describe it when they talk in the article itself about if you wanted to go a little outside of the box and not necessarily do a mega dungeon, but if you wanted to do a naval fleet or a fleet of pirate ships, where every day you can sort of work on 1 or 2 levels to a ship, and then you move to the next ship. So it can be different, but the same, but it allows you to create a lot of different content. And they also explain about how somebody is using it. In fact, I'm randomly scrolled right to this article section talking about game designer Rue Dickey is creating Carnival 23. He's writing Carnival games, shops, attractions, and NPCs. Each week could be a different theme. 1 week for games, 1 for shops, and another for more traditional map drawing dungeon.
What were you thinking? You already had an idea. You already had an idea for. You already had an idea for it. What was that?
Yeah. And it actually came when you sent this. I got really excited because I had an idea for a mega dungeon based off of a prison that I have installed in Animar. So when you had sent this to me, I got really excited because I knew that I wanted the prison to be a mega dungeon. But the thing about prisons is that they're not uninhabited monster lairs. There are criminals, active guards, and at the end of the day, my players need to be heroes. So what exactly would they do in this dungeon crawl besides just sneak around? And your answers have been phenomenal, by the way, so far. Just the idea of creating an encounter and forcing more of the narrative roleplay for a lot of the stealth encounters. Like, hey, it allows me to use my degree of success chart and push that narrative story play, because I want this to feel a little different than just roll through, kick the door in, murder monsters, grab loot, and go.
Yeah, you said this was going to highly focus on at least the more stealth aspect, or like sneaking around and trying to avoid guards.
Yeah.
And you don't want it to just be stealth rolls.
Right. And that's a big thing. And I know that's one of those kind of things where if you're constantly always making stealth checks, it's just kind of boring. So like you said, push into the narrative RP side will allow me to get everybody super involved. And I think that's where my flavor of degree of success will be successful, because I can set a DC, and depending on how high or low above that DC will determine how successful they are. So if they're not very successful, it doesn't mean they just don't sneak, but maybe something worse than being noticed happens. You know, an armored
Well,
boot slips off.
I was more suggesting not of the nature of using variable success, but I was more suggesting that instead of always rolling a stealth check, you could attempt to describe the situation in ways that your players could use other skills that they have to try to beat the same DC or beat the situation in where maybe not everyone has to roll. Maybe only one roll is necessary for success.
I like that too. And I was just reading about something similar in the intrigue rules from Ultimate Intrigue in Pathfinder First Edition. So it's something I have to explore as well. All of which will allow me to start January 1st. So I'm excited. Thank you. And you have had an idea, haven't you, about this?
Indeed. I'm going to GaryCon and Gen Con, and I was thinking about writing an adventure anyways for one of them involving a cave network. And so I figure I could design a cave network. And worst thing comes to worst, then I have 365 random caves that I can use next time I have a dungeon delving game.
Fair. Now, the cave system is probably going to be based off of the one that we talked about in one of the last episodes, right?
Probably not. I do.
No?
My party is currently going through a series of cave networks in their current adventure. And that probably is what's inspiring me to write an adventure with a cave network. So they do feed into each other.
Sure. It always seems to do so. Not a bad thing.
And I also do think that like playtesting is kind of a weird concept in tabletop RPGs, but I do feel like I can bounce ideas back and forth. Like I can try to use them in my home game, and if it works, it works, and I can toss it into this mega dungeon or into a tournament, and vice versa. I use a lot of going to conventions to test different ways of playing, or sometimes I'll even introduce house rules to convention games just to see how it's accepted. Just minor ones. Just, hey, we're going to try to do it this time, or we're going to try it like this.
Yeah. Now, are there any house rules that stick around?
There's always some house rules that stick around or become. I mean, you always like you when you go play at conventions too. You oftentimes like you'll hear different ways of saying like, oh, that's a this check or that's that, and get a little bit of lingo. Yeah,
I like that too.
I think there's like common house rules that spread too. So,
what are your favorite house rules?
Oh, I feel like that's too broad.
All right.
I try not to have too many house rules, but oftentimes the house rules will be like ways of like how to approach a situation or how to understand one checks. What one checks. I don't have a lot of. I'm clearly not picking up any examples off the top of my head.
It's all right. It's all right. The one I play with every single game is all of my players are allowed to have maximum health. So generally that's their hit die plus their constitution modifier every level. And they can just go straight to the max, no rolling, no wimpy heroes, full health.
Bring the wimpy heroes.
Well, truthfully, now that I'm playing with Paracula Mortis, the death flag, it's irrelevant anyway because they no longer actually die unless they're choosing to be willing to die. So it doesn't matter. That's my point here is I'm just trying to keep them alive. And usually I mean, honestly, even a wizard still with his measly hit points compared to a fighter or barbarian will still go down first. But, 40 hit points compared to 12 is a huge difference.
Now, to get back to talking about Dungeon23 again, or this mega dungeon, how are you going to keep on track? How are you going to do anything in specific to keep yourself on a schedule of making a room a day?
Well, I think instead of doing one room a day, I mean a 365 room prison would end up 100% like Alcatraz or worse. I think I will split it between designing rooms, traps, and encounters. So I'll cycle through. I will do X amount of rooms per floor, X amount of encounters per floor, and X amount of traps per floors. So that way I will have a versatile dungeon crawl that is both large and expansive, but yet random in feel.
Are you thinking about using any procedures or to help generate any of those specific categories, like the room sizes or shapes or what a room is?
I'm thinking right now that the prison itself is very brutalist in its design, so very square and blocky. I will probably keep the stairwell in opposite corners, and those will be consistent. The general layout will be relatively similar, but I might delve a little into the idea of the film, The Cube and Hypercube, where some rooms might rotate and change around based on what they contain. So I'm not exactly sure yet. I'm still in the planning stages.
I like it. I'm excited. I'm excited to try to do this and share them as they develop. I'm going to try to come up with a way to map out my progress in a way that's easy to share.
Now, how do you generally work? Do you like to work in a linear fashion from start to finish, or do you kind of pick areas that sound cool and then bridge them together?
When creating like a mega dungeon?
Mega dungeon, regular dungeon, cave system, anything.
I like to start with like kind of broad themes. So for a cave system, like, is there a river network? Is there a mine? Is there mine shafts in the area? Are there fault lines? Is it near the surface? Like, I'd like to have big, broad themes that I can apply over the entire area to know what might influence what's happening in it. So I'd like to say that I try to start with big ideas, or I like to try to start with one theme and kind of build off that.
That's fair. I generally start with a thematic element. This one being prison. The first thing I'll do is kind of start with the front door and then move farther into there. And if I come across something I like but doesn't fit the immediate scenario, I will apply it later and then try to find a way to bridge it. As long as I get back to it. Sometimes I can't. I got to scrap the idea or move it to a different project. But I'm very linear.
I think a big thing that, for me, I like to start with a goal. Mm-hmm. For a cave system, is the goal to find treasure? Is the goal to escape? Is the goal to get out or to go up? Because if you're designing a dungeon where the goal is to get up, you don't have to spend a lot of time building down.
Right.
Yep. So, and even for each individual room, you should have a goal for what that room does for your party.
Yeah, like trap rooms. Like this room, door closes and starts to fill with gas. I do know that when I put my players through this eventually, I want it to be almost like a prison break. So they have to find a way in, break somebody out, and then get out with them. So
I worry about that a little bit with the scale of a mega dungeon. At least unless the setting supports having mega dungeons in it, and then if it's Judge Dredd or an entire prison planet, I think that can have a mega dungeon. But I worry about if you put a lot of energy into designing this enormous prison, how much time is the party actually going to spend in it if they're trying to make a prison break? Is it two sessions?
It'll probably be longer. We're spending a whole lot more time between things this time around. I want to be able to instill the sense of both dread and imposing brutalism into the dungeon crawl itself. So I want it to be hard. I want it to be slow. I want it to be, let's not get caught. because there's no things like security cameras. There's going to be old school bell alarms and visual sights based on what the guards can see. So going along that route allows them to, if done right, or at least if done in the way I envision it to be done, take their time and be way more methodical, because they're not searching for treasure. They're searching for one specific target, and then they have to backtrack out, the path may be the same, but the encounters may be different.
I have a feeling that if you spend a year on this prison, it's going to turn into a prison city, and it's going to be awesome.
It might, because the area in which it is currently located would support that. So, now that you've planted that seed, it's going to be incredibly hard to pull that back.
I do think that's another thing, is if we're committing to a 365-day dungeon creation, I think being flexible about what it is and its end goal is also going to be important.
Yeah,
at least if you want to see it to completion, which
I agree. I think the flexibility here is incredibly important. So, does that mean that you might end up, 6 weeks into a cave system, and then all of a sudden we're in an underwater Atlantis situation?
If that's the way the cave network goes.
You going to procedurally generate anything, or are you just going to kind of plan each one out by hand?
I think I'm going to start. I think I'm going to do some reading through some like cave network generators, just to get a broad scape of. I like some of the ideas where you like drop dice or try to create random shapes and then create a cave out of that. I think that can create some really interesting things, and inevitably you end up seeing an idea in it and then building something wonderful out of it. So
yeah, I like that. That's neat. I've been using a lot of district maps lately of cities. So I'll find like zoning maps of a city that matches the approximate shape I have in my head, and then I'll turn those districts into the city districts, and my city will only be as large as the districts are contained.
That's awesome. I've done some similar things with like at least mining maps, old mining maps, and trying to find just random cartography.
Yeah. I like that. There are so many resources out there that you don't ever consider really looking into. One of the ones that I just got into recently is books for authors, which as a dungeon master, we're crafting these stories. So I've been getting books on how to write character arcs or mythology in the real world as all source of references on how to connect certain dots and make character arcs the best possible for my players.
I think the best thing that you can do to try to be a better GM is to read more. Then you just get more examples of, to read more and to play more. Just to try things and to see more ideas.
Absolutely agree. So we're just about to hit our 45-minute mark, and we have been able to talk about this Dungeon23 for a long time, and I'm excited. How often do you want to come back and check up for our audience? Like every few weeks, once a month, once every 2 months?
I think we'll see when we have. I mean, if we're keeping in contact about it, I think we'll see exciting things that we do, or maybe not so exciting things, and then we can call each other out on it.
Fair enough.
So I think we'll just touch on it here and there.
Okay. So the next random update will be random.
I think we'll wait till 23 to decide that.
Fair enough. Otherwise, they're going to get quarterly updates, and Rob is going to be like, I have not done anything.
Yeah, we'll bug you very quickly. A lot at the very beginning.
That's going to get us started. So I appreciate it. Any final words of advice for, honestly, our first episode of the new year, our last episode of this year? I don't remember exactly when we're looking. Eli, this is the last episode of the year.
Oh, shucks.
Yeah. Anything that you want to part yearly wisdom for?
Put that in a jam and eat it.
I don't know what to say to that. Well, guys,
Neither. Yeah.
check us out at epictablegames.com. Thanks for joining us in Side Quests, and have a wonderful, happy, and safe new year. We'll see you in 2023.
Adios.
Okay, new intro. We've changed the name, and we're still using the word paladin. Paladin. I mean, it hasn't been used in the English language in about 200 years, but okay.